You lost the Battle of Hastings, but not because of bad tactics. You lost it because you were already dead on your feet before it started. And you still had to stand in that wall for 9 hours. 300 miles in under 3 weeks. A bloodbath at Stamford Bridge. No food on the way back. By the time you reached Senlac Hill, your body had already given up. The Normans were fresh. You weren't, and that's what killed you. Now understand what losing meant. Not just a king dead on a field, not just a new face on the coin. Everything. The language your lord spoke when he judged your land dispute, gone. The name carved above your village church, gone. The family that had held those acres for 4 generations, erased, replaced by a Norman stranger who didn't know your name and didn't need to. Every huscarl standing in that shield wall knew this. They weren't fighting for Harold. They were fighting for the world they recognized. And yet, knowing all of that, men's legs still shook, stomachs still cramped, hands still trembled on axe hafts. So the only question that actually matters isn't whether the stakes were high enough. It's how broken men find the will to stand anyway. We're going to walk you through that day the way your body experienced it, not as a map, but as a timeline of collapse. As a timeline of collapse. The pre-dawn assembly in the cold, the first Norman advance up the ridge, the arrow storm that turned the sky dark, the cavalry smashing into the wall again and again, the feigned retreat that pulled some of your brothers out of formation, and finally, the moment near dusk when the line just stopped reforming. 9 hours, 6 phases. Somewhere in that sequence, there was a moment when victory became impossible. But your legs didn't know it yet. Which phase was it? What does a man think about in the dark before a battle he suspects he cannot win? Not glory, not England. He thinks about the weight on his shoulders. It is somewhere around 4 in the morning. The October air is cold enough to see your breath. You pull the gambeson over your head first, the quilted linen tunic that will sit against your skin for the next 9 hours. The gambeson is already stiff from 3 weeks of sweat and rain. Then comes the byrnie. 25 pounds of iron rings, maybe 30. You feel it settle onto your shoulders like something that has decided to live there. It does not feel like armor. It feels like debt. Around you, men are doing the same thing in silence. The sound is just the slow, metallic hiss of mail shifting and settling. Nobody is speaking loudly. There is nothing to say that has not already been said, or that would help. Your boots are still damp. Your legs carry the memory of 400 miles. Harold force-marched this army south from Stamford Bridge in under 2 weeks, York to London in 4 days, then London to Hastings in 2 more. Many of these men have barely slept on a flat surface since September. You are standing on a ridge you have never seen before, in the dark, waiting for a light you are not sure you want to arrive. The waiting is the part nobody records. But the waiting is where the breaking begins. Here is what all of that was building toward. By the time Harold's men formed that shield wall at Senlac Hill, their bodies were already failing them, and the numbers make that impossible to argue away. York to London. Roughly 200 miles. Harold covered it in 4 days. That is not a march. That is a controlled collapse forward. A fit soldier in modern conditions can sustain about 25 miles a day before performance begins to degrade. Harold's huscarls were doing nearly 50. Sleep, when it came at all, came in snatched hours beside roads, in fields, in the wet October dark you already know too well. Then London to Hastings. 2 more days. 2 more days on legs that had not recovered. And underneath all of that, underneath the blisters and the hunger and the sleeplessness, were the wounds from Stamford Bridge. 19 days earlier. Sword cuts, axe trauma, the deep bruising that mail can never fully stop. Wounds that had not closed properly, walked on, marched on, bleeding quietly through every mile south. Modern military science calls this cumulative degradation, the compounding decline in body and mind when stress is never allowed to clear. Reaction time slows. Decision-making narrows. Grip strength drops. The body begins rationing itself, prioritizing survival over performance, which is precisely the wrong state for standing in a shield wall against fresh cavalry. So here's the question that follows you into the morning. Did Harold know how broken his army was? And if he did, why did he still give the order to hold the ridge? If the high ground was such an advantage, why would it ultimately not be enough? You stand with them at first light on October 14th. Senlac Hill, a low ridge, nothing dramatic, just enough elevation to make the Normans climb toward you instead of riding through you. The position is textbook. 800 meters of frontage along the crest, marshland guarding both flanks. Anyone who wants to reach you has to funnel into the center, uphill, into overlapping shields and axes. Harold chose this ground because it turns Norman mobility into a liability. You can hear the assembly now. 7,000 men, maybe 8, packing shoulder to shoulder. The clink of mail, the scrape of shield rims locking into place. Someone behind you is breathing too fast. Someone else is praying under his breath in a dialect you don't recognize. The smell is already wrong. Sweat, yes, but under it, the sour edge of infection. Unwashed linen pressed against wounds that haven't healed. You catch it in the wind, faint but insistent, like the hill itself is exhaling sickness. Below you, the Normans are forming up in 3 divisions: Breton, Flemish, Norman Center. Flags you can't quite make out in the haze. They look rested. They look fed. And that is when the next question arrives. What happens when good terrain meets men who no longer have the strength to hold it? The answer is, the wall holds until it doesn't, and the moment it stops holding is invisible from the outside. Below, the Norman archers step forward. There are hundreds of them, and they loose in volleys. You hear it before you see it, a low hiss, almost soft, rising as it closes. Then the crack and thud of iron points finding wood. Shields jerk on arms, a sound like hail on a barn roof, except each impact weighs something. Here is what the Normans don't know yet. Arrows fired uphill bleed speed. The angle strips them of the flat driving force that punches through mail at close range. Most of what reaches your line is slowed enough that the overlapping shields do their job. The men holding them trained for this geometry. The wall absorbs. But absorbing is not free. Every blocked arrow is weight, on the arm, on the shoulder, on the attention. And then one gets through. A gap in the overlap, a shield tilted a half-second too late. The man to your left goes down without a sound that makes sense. No shout, just a weight leaving the line. Now you feel it. A cold inch of open air on your left side where his shoulder used to be. The wall hasn't broken, but it has thinned. And the man who filled that gap 5 seconds later is not the man who trained to stand in it. That substitution costs something no one can measure. And the Normans haven't sent the cavalry yet. How long can a man hold a shield wall before his arms simply stop working? The answer is somewhere between 12 and 20 minutes of continuous contact. After that, the muscles stop obeying. Not metaphorically, literally, the lactic acid builds until the fibers refuse the signal. Now imagine the Normans are in their 3rd assault. At Senlac Hill, the front rank was not fighting with swords, not mostly. Shield wall combat was a shoving match, a grinding, crushing, airless push. The man behind pressed into your back. The man in front pressed into your chest. Everyone was trying to stay vertical while making the other see. The noise was not what you expect from the films. No clean ring of steel. It was percussion. The wet thud of wood on wood. The crack of a split board. The low, constant roar of several thousand men grunting in unison. And then a huscarl in the Saxon line shifted his grip, A trained huskarl with a two-handed Dane axe was a weapon class of his own. Not a sword fighter, an engine. A single diagonal swing could open a Norman kite shield from rim to boss, and the arm holding that shield with it. The Normans in the front rank knew this. You can see it in how they clustered, how they tried to come in at angles, how they were afraid to let the Saxon line breathe. But even the huskarls were tired. They had marched from York. They had buried men at Stamford Bridge. The axe that weighed 4 pounds at dawn weighed twice that by now. And the Normans had not yet tried the feigned retreat. The Norman cavalry charged the Saxon wall repeatedly and failed every time. So what finally changed? The answer is not what the Normans did. It is what the Saxons felt. You are standing in the shield wall when you hear it. A low rumble, not thunder, hooves, hundreds of them. The ground begins to pulse through your boots. Your chest begins to pulse with it. The Norman knights are coming uphill at you, and every animal instinct you possess is screaming one word: run. But you do not run, because the men beside you do not run. Because running alone is death. The horses do not hit the wall. This is the part that gets forgotten. A warhorse will not charge into a hedge of spears and locked shields. It will pull up. It will swerve. The rider will lean in, thrust with a lance, wheel away. The cavalry is not a battering ram. It is a test of whether you will flinch, whether the man next to you will step back, whether the wall will crack. For hours it does not crack. The Saxons hold. The cavalry wheels and reforms and charges again, and the wall holds again. But holding costs something. It costs breath. It costs nerve. It costs the kind of muscular control that runs out when you have been awake for 36 hours. And then a few Normans break. They turn. They flee back down the hill. And some of the Saxons chase them. You have been standing in that wall for 6 hours. Not moving forward, not retreating, just holding, absorbing. Your shield arm stopped feeling pain around hour 3. Now it just feels like weight. Your legs are operating on something that is not quite strength anymore. Call it habit. Call it the fact that the man on your left is still standing, so you are still standing. But here is what the history books tend to skip past. You were already broken before this morning. You marched 300 miles in 3 weeks. You fought at Stamford Bridge. You buried men you knew by name. You ate what you could find and slept in ditches, and then you ran south because Harold said run. The shield wall did not hold because these men were fresh. It held because they refused to acknowledge what their bodies already knew. And that refusal has a limit. Every body has a shutdown threshold. A line where the signal from your muscles stops being a warning and starts being a fact. By mid-afternoon, these men were standing on the other side of that line. The question is not whether they will break. The question is what breaks them first. And then the Bretons ran. The left flank of the Norman line, already the weakest point, the men William trusted least, turned and fled down the slope. And you watched it happen from the ridge. Here is the question that has no clean answer. Was that a trap? Or did William simply recover fast enough to turn a genuine collapse into something useful? It almost does not matter. Because what happened next was not a decision. It was a release. Some of the Saxon right broke from the wall. They went downhill after the fleeing Normans. Ferdmen, probably. Maybe huskarls. Men who had been standing and absorbing and holding for hours. Men who had been moving without rest for weeks. And suddenly there was a back turned to them. And something in the deeper animal part of the mind said, now. That is not stupidity. Stupidity implies you had a functioning, rational mind and chose to ignore it. These men no longer had that. The override system that keeps a soldier in formation, the part that says hold, wait, trust the line, that system runs on something. It runs on sleep and food and the absence of grief. By mid-afternoon at Senlac, the body had spent everything. The Normans turned. They encircled the pursuers. They destroyed them. And the right flank of the Saxon wall, the place where that hole opened, never fully closed again. The shield wall was not broken by Norman genius. It was broken by the weight of everything that came before this hill. But there is one more thing still coming. Did the wall collapse because Harold died? Or was Harold's death only possible because the wall was already collapsing? Late afternoon, the shield wall is holding by inertia alone. Men are dying in place. The line is no longer a structure. It is a behavior sustained by one thing: the dragon standard behind them and the man beneath it. Harold Godwinson, king, commander, the point around which the entire Saxon formation orbits. Then he dies. The sources don't agree how. An arrow through the eye, a sword cut in the melee. The exact detail doesn't matter. What matters is that in a warrior society built on personal loyalty, the oath of the Huscarl had an object. You stayed in the line because you defended him, the body of your king, the man you swore to. And now he is gone. The dragon standard falls. The Norman cavalry sees it go down. They push forward. The Huscarls around Harold's position fight to the last, because that's what the oath requires. But the men 50 yards away don't see the details. They see the standard is gone. They see the king is gone. And the question forms, what are we defending? The wall doesn't shatter. It doesn't even break. It unravels, section by section. The focal point is gone. The reason to stay is gone. The collapse is not tactical. It is psychological. And it is total. You are running now. Not because you chose to, because the man on your left ran first. And when he went, the shield that covered your flank went with him. And the spear that would have hit him found you instead. So you ran. That is how a wall dies. Not in a charge, not in a final stand, in a calculation. A silent animal calculation that happens somewhere beneath thought. The formation is no longer protecting you. It is exposing you. Your legs are gone. They have been gone for hours. But fear does something to legs. Fear finds reserves that exhaustion buried. You are moving faster now than you have moved in 3 weeks. The ridge behind you, the road behind you, the dark tree line, all of it pulling you backward. And behind you, the thunder of hooves is getting louder. The Normans do not let men reach the trees. That is not how you finish a battle. You chase. You cut down. You make the route complete so that no scattered war band ever reforms. 9 hours of holding. 9 hours of bleeding and standing and refusing. It becomes nothing in 90 seconds. And then the hill is theirs. England is theirs. And you, if you are still breathing, are running through the dark without a king, without a wall, without a name for what just happened. You look back at Senlac Hill now and you see the tactics, the feigned retreats, the arrow in the eye, William's gamble, Harold's fatal charge. But that is not what decided it. What decided it was the 300 miles your legs had already walked, the 6 nights you had not slept, the meals you had not eaten, the adrenaline you had already burned through at Stamford Bridge 3 weeks before you even saw a Norman. Modern military physiology has a term for it: cumulative stress load, sleep deprivation beyond 72 hours, glycogen depletion, the exhaustion of the muscle's last fuel reserves, acute stress accumulation. Each one, independently, degrades decision-making and physical output by measurable percentages. Harold's army had all three, simultaneously, for weeks. The Normans did not break the Saxon shield wall with brilliance. They waited for it to break itself. And it did, because flesh has limits, because the body keeps score, because you cannot march an army into exhaustion and expect it to hold when the hill starts to crack. You were there, on that hill, carrying everything that came before the battle, every sleepless night on the road north, every empty stomach, every friend left behind at Stamford Bridge. The Normans did not beat you. The weaks did. That is the story history keeps burying under kings and arrows and providence. If that reframing stays with you, subscribe and tell us in the comments which battle you think history got wrong. The next video is already waiting. And if you want to go deeper, the next video is already waiting.